At 2 a.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Lost track of time. From my boss. Not a question, not an apology, just a shove that meant, stay reachable. I lay there with the screen burning a rectangle into the dark and felt that old familiar tug. Answer now. Prove you're the kind of guy who doesn't sleep through emergencies. Be useful. It's ridiculous how quickly a grown man can roll himself back into the shape of a schoolboy waiting for a gold star. I type 3 words. What do you need? And watch the typing dots appear like a heart monitor on someone else's life. I didn't always answer. That's the lie I told myself. Sometimes I waited 10 minutes, or I put the phone face down and pretended to be the sort of person who has boundaries. But the truth is, I'd been trained the way you train a dog. Treat, treat, whistle. My boss, Evan, had a knack for it. He never yelled. He didn't need to. He could slice with a compliment so thin you only bled later. You're the steady one, he liked to say, tapping my shoulder at 7:42 p.m. as he wandered past my desk with his coat still on the chair. You're the guy I can text at odd hours because you won't melt. The first time he said it, I wore it like a medal. The 50th time, it felt like a leash. My girlfriend, Mara, started sleeping with earplugs because of the buzzes. She didn't make it a fight. She just rolled away from the light and pulled the blanket to her shoulder. We got good at silent routines. Her tea mug upside down to dry, my laptop closed and stacked under the remote, our toothbrushes like 2 soldiers at attention. I told myself this was partnership, compromise, adulthood. Somewhere under that, acid collected. The office didn't help. The place was designed for eyes. Glass conference rooms, glass offices, even a glass wellness room. That was technically private if you ignored the fact that everyone could see you sitting inside with your head in your hands. The floors were polished enough to show the outline of your regret. We made branded software for companies that had mascots and mantras, and a lot of money lying around in piles shaped like innovation. I was a product manager, which is a nice way of saying I was a translator between people who sold dreams and people who wrote code. I was good at it because I listened and I remembered. Evan was good at it because he listened and kept a ledger. He arrived late most mornings with nothing but his phone and a smile he kept in the pocket of his jaw. He didn't carry a bag. He didn't need notes. He would lean on someone's cubicle wall and ask how their weekend was, not to hear the answer, but to weigh how much edge they had left. Then he'd drop a timeline like a coin into a jar. Ping, and the whole floor vibrated around the echo. We're moving the beta up. I promised Friday. I know it's tight, but that's why I have the A-team. If you protested, he looked hurt. If you nodded, he clapped lightly like you'd solved something for him. Promise to who? I asked once, still young enough to think that mattered. He blinked, amused. To the future, he said, as if the calendar owed him interest. There were signs if you pay attention to the small inventory of your own day. The way the expense reports piled in his outbox like darts he hadn't thrown yet. The way he used shared drives like a mess hall. Grab what you want, leave your plates for someone else. When he borrowed a designer from another team, the guy never came back. When a QA lead asked for a week to test new billing, Evan said, "Let's look alive," and assigned half the cases to me. I told myself this was trust. I took them home and ticked boxes while the rice cooker hissed and the apartment swelled with steam. I slept with screenshots in my head. He liked late-night messages that weren't requests, just statements that move the ground under your feet. Need to refactor pricing tiers. Board wants a story on churn. Lost track of time. That was his way of rolling a grenade into your living room and announcing it as weather. If he ever said sorry, it was in the middle of another sentence, like a comma you weren't supposed to see. He knew the time. He always knew the time. The first time he texted at 2, I was honest. Can we do this in the morning? He called me 5 minutes later. Not angry, never angry. Just weary, like we'd both been let down. Look, I wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent. You know how the window narrows when our partners start humming. If we miss it, we lose a quarter. He didn't say which partners, which window, which quarter. He didn't have to. He spoke in abstractions that made you feel provincial for needing nouns. I opened my laptop. By 2:38 a.m., I had a deck sent and a knot behind my eye. He replied with a thumbs up and a, "You're a lifesaver." I slept like a man who'd swallowed a battery. At stand-up the next day, Evan made a joke about vampires and our resident night shift. The laughter was gentle, complicit. People like laughing at you when it means they don't have to be you. I smiled back, because that's what you do when the person who budgets your life pretends you're a character, he wrote. Mara texted me a photo of a cup of coffee with boundaries written in cinnamon on the foam. It was a joke. Mostly. I don't know when admiration turned to measurement. Maybe it was the client dinner where Evan ordered bottles with labels you pronounce like a cough, then made the server take one back for being too forward. And maybe it was the time he told a junior dev she was alarmingly good, and then asked if she wanted to see how the sausage gets funded. Maybe it was nothing dramatic, just the accumulation of drafts you never sent, and apologies you wrote with your face. I started counting his habits the way you count your own repetitions at the gym. 3 late pings this week, 2 calendar invites after hours, one more time that my name turned into a lever. Mara asked me on a Sunday morning if I wanted to go to her sister's for a barbecue. I told her I'd try. That's the ugliest word we use to build a life. Try. It's enough to move the moment down the road where both of you can pretend you meant yes. I meant yes. At 4 p.m., Evan texted about a demo environment that was flaky. At 4:10, I wrote him a fix that would hold for a day. At 5:20, he liked it. At 6:03, I was still at my desk, making it permanent. At 7:15, I sent an apology text to Mara and stared at her, no worries, long enough to see the pixels. "In another life," she said that night, "you'd be the surgeon who never comes home." I told her software isn't flesh. She said, "It eats like it is." There were perks. Evan put my name on things. He mentioned me to the COO in elevators. He said indispensable in a meeting and looked at me like the word belonged on my shirt. That stuff works on you the way sugar works on your tongue. You know it's a trick. You want more anyway. It was around then that I noticed something small in a shared spreadsheet I wasn't supposed to care about. Our pilot discounts for a certain customer didn't match the agreement I'd seen. The numbers were heavier, like a jacket with something in the pocket. I flagged it to finance. They wrote back, all approved, via E. E is what people wrote when they wanted to sound casual about a person who could bury them in calendar invites. I didn't reply. I just watched how that number spread into other sheets, and how Pilot seemed to last as long as it needed to. That night, I set my phone to Do Not Disturb and slept with it in the kitchen. I woke to 5 missed messages, 2 from Evan and 3 from my own brain, all with the same subject. "You good?" At 8:11 a.m., I typed, "Didn't see these. Catching up now." He sent back a winky face and "no stress," which is code for "I noticed." He stood behind me at noon and asked, hand on my chair, "Everything smooth at home?" He didn't mean home. I wish I could tell you that I was a hero then, that I confronted him, that I quit, that I marched with a box to the elevator and went to plant tomatoes. What I did was more boring. I started writing things down, not as a plan, as an antidote to gaslighting myself. Dates, times, the exact words of messages, copied into a notes file with the punctuation intact. I wrote how I felt when I read them, not because feelings make good evidence, but because they evaporate, and when they're gone, you tell yourself you weren't drowning. Mara asked me in the car one night, if you could press a button and have him treat you like a human, would you stay? I said yes, too fast. She tapped the steering wheel. Then maybe the problem isn't the job. Maybe it's the button. I didn't answer. You don't say out loud that you're waiting for a grown man to become decent. Weeks passed in that weird office season where the days are bright, but the air conditioning's always a little too cold, so everyone dresses like they're going to different climates. We launched the feature. The metrics looked pretty on slides. Evan used "we" like it was a crowbar, He wrote me at 1:12 a.m. one night. You still up? I wasn't. I wrote back at 7:30. Just saw this. He sent a thumbs up. At stand-up, he called me reliable and asked if I could shadow a billing call after hours for optics. Optics is what you say when you want the truth to stand in the back. By then I knew the shape of his texts, the cadence, the part where he said a thing like lost track of time to make you feel like time was something that happened to him, not something he did to you. I knew, too, the small shift in me when I read them, the place where fear and compliance meet. I started to suspect he knew I knew. That's the strangest point in any bad arrangement, the moment when both of you see the wire and both keep walking. The night the message came, the one I'm telling you about, it didn't feel different at first. The room was dark, and the air had that stale, screen-warm smell of a day spent indoors. The phone lit the ceiling. Lost track of time, he wrote, like we were talking about weather again, like the hour had walked away from him on little legs. I was awake already, not because of him, but because my own heartbeat had been practicing for weeks. I stared at the words, and, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel small. I felt something set inside me, like a level finding true. I typed, watched the dots appear, and put my feet on the floor. The carpet was cool. The apartment was quiet in that way a place is quiet when it's listening to what you'll do next. By the time the sun slid through the blinds that morning, I already knew I wasn't just tired. I was done pretending fatigue was loyalty. Evan walked into the office around 10, holding his coffee like a priest carries wine, nodding at whoever met his eyes. "Big week, team," he said. "Let's stay fluid." He looked straight at me when he said it, the corner of his mouth tilting just enough to register as both a smile and a warning. I looked back, steady. "Always am." He hesitated for half a second like he could feel the difference. Then he walked off, his shoes whispering against the tile. The man moved like someone who believed the floor existed for his benefit. That day, the office buzzed with the sound of compliance. Keyboards, Slack pings, polite laughter. You'd think a modern company would sound like progress. It doesn't. It sounds like endurance. Every click was a heartbeat under pressure. Every meeting invite a pulse check for obedience. Evan thrived in that noise. He was the conductor, and the hum was his orchestra. But when you start watching the conductor instead of the music, you begin to see the sleight of hand. He started bringing me into off-record discussions, 2 or 3 people in a conference room with blinds drawn, talking about accelerating revenue opportunities. That's how he phrased everything illegal, accelerating. What he meant was skimming small percentages from pilot deals, temporarily shifting discount margins until the next quarter, when nobody remembered the original numbers. It wasn't grand theft. It was 1,000 paper cuts, all labeled innovation. He'd smile across the table, tapping his pen. "This is just bridge financing, guys. You build the bridge, we cross it, we're heroes." Someone always nodded first, then I did. I'd tell myself I was protecting my job, my reputation, my mortgage, anything that made me sound like a man of reason instead of a coward. Nights got longer. His messages came later. "Need eyes on this file? Quick review before it hits legal. Lost track of time." Always the same pattern. No please, no question mark. Sometimes I'd hear the ping before I even reached the bedroom, and it would hit me like a reflex. Answer or risk extinction. Mara stopped asking what I was doing. She just watched. That's worse than anger. She'd brush her teeth in silence, her reflection behind mine in the mirror. 2 strangers rehearsing for separate lives. "You don't even blink when he texts," she said once, "like your pulse waits for permission." I didn't reply, because she was right. The more I tried to detach, the more he closed the circle. At work, he made sure to praise me in public. "Couldn't have done this sprint without our anchor," he'd say in meetings, leaning back like he owned gravity. "He keeps us honest." People laughed. I didn't. Honesty was a word he'd hollowed out and filled with himself. Then came the new client initiative. He pulled me aside after a meeting, that gentle tone, the false camaraderie. "Listen, I trust you," he said, lowering his voice like he was about to confess something holy. "We're doing a private beta for a partner company. It's off cycle, so finance won't know until we reconcile next month. I just need you to clean up the contract language. Make it look internal. Keep it neat. Keep it quiet." I stared at him. "Is that even approved?" Evan smiled like I'd told a joke. "That's why it's called initiative." He left the folder on my desk and walked away before I could answer. The man never waited for consent. He just assumed it. Inside the folder, a few printouts, a new client name I didn't recognize, and an attached invoice dated 2 months ahead. At the bottom, the signature field was empty except for one note. Final approval, EA, his initials. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the contract, my dinner cold beside it. The light above me hummed softly, the kind of noise you stop hearing when you've been silent too long. Mara was asleep already. I could hear her faint breathing from the other room. Calm, steady, innocent. I envied it. I opened my laptop, logged into the company drive, and checked the permissions on the folder. Evan had left it public. That was his arrogance, or his confidence that no one would ever look. I copied the files to a flash drive. Then, without thinking, I started a document titled log.txt and wrote down every single late-night message he'd ever sent me, every instruction, every change to billing, every favor. Not because I had a plan, because something in me needed proof that I wasn't imagining this. The next day, he called me into his office. First thing, no warning. "Late night?" he asked, smiling too easily. "Productive," I said. He studied me. "Good. We've got an audit coming up. Make sure the decks align with what finance expects to see. Keep the extras clean." "The extras?" I asked. He shrugged. "Every team has extras." Then he leaned back in his chair. "You look tired. You're not burning out on me, are you?" I smiled thinly. "Not yet." He smirked. "That's my guy." I spent the next week quietly cleaning my trail, archiving personal emails, syncing files to a private drive, collecting backups. The office felt different after that, like I was standing in the same room but breathing a different kind of air. I caught glimpses of him pacing during calls, his reflection split across the glass panels, like a man in multiple lives at once. At night, I'd rewatch the audit logs, see which files he'd accessed after hours. It was all there. Timestamps, edits, the quiet fingerprints of manipulation. I started screen recording sessions. Not for revenge, for reality. Mara found the flash drive once, on the counter near the coffee maker. "What's this?" she asked. "Work stuff." "You don't bring work home anymore," she said quietly. "I guess it brought itself." She looked at me for a long moment, and then put the drive back down. "Whatever you're doing," she said, "make sure it's worth losing sleep over." I didn't tell her that by then sleep was the only thing I'd already lost. 2 Fridays later, Evan invited the whole team for after-work drinks. I went. I needed to watch him in his natural habitat. The bar, the laughter, the false warmth. He was magnetic when he wanted to be, the kind of man who made people feel lucky just to orbit his gravity. He bought the first round, told stories that bent truth until it begged for mercy, and when someone asked how he stayed so driven, he winked. "Time management. You just stop counting hours." Everyone laughed. I didn't. At that moment, I decided what I needed to do. That weekend, I built a quiet little system on my home laptop, a mirrored inbox rule that forwarded every message from him to a private address I'd created, time-stamped and encrypted. I wrote a short Python script to automatically log the metadata of his emails. Not the content, just the headers. Enough to prove a pattern of time, frequency, and intent. It wasn't illegal. It was self-preservation. By Sunday night, I had a record of every 2 a.m. text he'd ever sent me, and every reply I'd ever been stupid enough to type back. That's when the guilt shifted into clarity. When you stop seeing a man as your superior and start seeing him as evidence, everything changes. The next message came the following Thursday. 1:57 a.m. Evan. Lost track of time. You up? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed something new this time. Me. Yeah, let's talk. Office? He replied instantly. Now? Me. Now. I sat back, heart slow, breathing steady. If he wanted to play nocturnal games, I was finally ready to change the rules. By 2:10, he'd be there, and this time, I'd be waiting. He arrived faster than I expected. At 2:08 a.m., headlights cut across the parking lot, flashing through the rain-streaked glass of the office lobby. I watched from the darkened second floor as Evan's sleek black Audi glided into his reserved spot, the one labeled Executive Access Only. He didn't even kill the engine right away. He just sat there, his face ghostly blue under the dashboard light, typing something on his phone. My phone vibrated on the desk. Evan. You're in already? Me. Yeah, been here a while. I left the message hanging like bait in the water. He got out of the car, adjusting his jacket in that smooth, controlled way he always did, as if even gravity needed his permission. The building was silent except for the hum of servers and the soft click of the elevator. I'd left the main lights off, only the glow of monitors bouncing off the glass partitions. In that low light, the office didn't look like success anymore. It looked like evidence. Evan stepped in, scanning the room. Couldn't sleep? He asked, half joking. Guess not, I said. You said it was urgent. He smiled, that disarming grin he used like a scalpel. It always is. Sit down. We'll go over it quick. He dropped his laptop bag on the table, opened it, and turned the screen toward me. Invoices, contracts, a spreadsheet I recognized from the private beta folder. He scrolled fast, confident, the way only guilty men scroll. These need to be locked before Monday, he said. Audit windows closing. I trust you to clean the edges. Edges? I asked. He leaned closer. Numbers, notes, who saw what. Just make sure it reads clean. Legal loves simplicity. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, You ever wonder what happens when things stop reading clean? His eyes narrowed. Meaning, I said slowly, when someone else reads it before you get to rewrite it. The temperature in the room changed. He straightened, the practiced charm slipping just a fraction. You've been working too hard, he said. Don't start imagining monsters. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. The mirrored folder glowed on the screen. Timestamps, messages, document trails, all neatly arranged. Those monsters you're talking about? I said. They timestamped themselves. He stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. You've been keeping logs. I've been keeping the truth, I said. His laugh came short and sharp. Jesus, you think this is a movie? You think anyone cares about a few messages taken out of context? I clicked one file, an email chain between him and a supplier, where the billing discrepancy was spelled out line by line. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He reached for the laptop, but I slid it back. Touch that, I said quietly, and I'll hit send. He froze. Send where? I nodded toward the security camera above the door, the one he'd had installed for safety, but never realized was connected to the corporate server. Company audit team, I said. They'll have the same copy I do by sunrise. The mask cracked, then just for a second. The calm, the composure, the false empathy, all gone. Underneath, there was something small and cornered. You don't know what you're doing, he said. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're burning your own career. You'll go down with me. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll stop kneeling. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. You're not built for this, man. You're the quiet one, remember? The steady one. Let me fix this. I can still fix this for both of us. I almost laughed. The audacity of it. The instinct to negotiate control, even when it's slipping through your hands. I'm not asking for a fix, I said. I'm asking for distance. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as a subordinate, but as a threat he hadn't accounted for. "Delete it," he said finally, "and I forget this conversation ever happened." I shut the laptop. "I don't need you to forget," I said. "I need you to remember." His composure cracked again, voice rising. "You think they'll side with you? You think they'll believe some midnight story over me? They won't have to," I said. "They'll have numbers. They'll have timestamps. They'll have your fingerprints all over every single file you told me to clean." The room went still. He looked around, realizing the door camera was blinking red, recording. "Are you recording this?" "Company property," I said. Guess we both lost track of time. He didn't shout. That wasn't his way. He just stood there, jaw clenched, breathing like a man trying not to shatter. Then he grabbed his laptop and stormed out, the elevator doors closing behind him with a metallic sigh. I sat there for a long time after that. The rain had stopped. The world outside was quiet. Inside the office, the servers kept humming, indifferent and eternal. I opened a terminal window and checked the upload log. The files had synced. All of it, messages, call logs, internal reports, safely encrypted, time-stamped, mirrored in the audit drive. It was done. No theatrics, no revenge speech, no outburst. Just silence, the kind that follows when truth finally has somewhere to go. At 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed one last time. "Evan, you have no idea what you've just done." I didn't reply. Instead, I powered it off, slid it face down on the desk, and watched its reflection fade in the glass. For the first time in months, I didn't feel cornered. I felt empty. And that emptiness was freedom. Tomorrow would come with consequences. But tonight, for the first time, I had proof. And proof, in the right hands, is the most dangerous form of peace there is. The next morning, the office didn't feel like the same building. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that means everyone knows something before you do. When I walked in, people were already watching me. Not directly, but the way you look at a car crash, while pretending you're reading a billboard. Evan's door was closed. That never happened. He was the kind of man who left his door open just so his presence leaked into the hallway. The blinds were shut tight now. I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to the kitchen, poured burnt coffee into a paper cup, and watched the hallway reflection in the microwave door. At 9:06 a.m., 2 people from compliance walked in. Suits, badges, that heavy walk of people who don't make jokes for a living. They didn't ask for him. They just went. A minute later, the blinds in Evan's office fluttered. Someone had moved too close to them, and then the door opened. He came out looking smaller, not broken, not yet, just human. He glanced around, found me, and for a heartbeat we looked at each other. There was no anger in his eyes, just the disbelief of a man who's finally realized the rules aren't written in his language anymore. Then he turned and they led him down the hall. By noon, the company had gone into controlled panic mode. HR booked emergency meetings. Legal sent reminders about confidentiality clauses. The leadership Slack channel, usually full of motivational noise, was dead silent. At 1:15, my manager messaged me privately. "We'd like you to take the rest of the week off." That was polite code for, "We need to figure out how close you were to the fire." I closed my laptop, walked out without saying a word. The sunlight outside hit harder than it should have. I'd been breathing recycled air for too long. At home, Mara was waiting on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked at me like she already knew something had shifted. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, sitting down. "He's done." She blinked. "Fired?" "Investigated," I corrected. Same thing with more paperwork. She nodded slowly, like she was absorbing the gravity of it. "Was it worth it?" I took a breath. "Ask me tomorrow." 2 days later, the official memo went out. Effective immediately, Evan Andrews has resigned for personal reasons. We thank him for his leadership and wish him well. The office applauded in emojis. Nobody said his name out loud. I spent the rest of the week deleting old folders, archiving logs and cleaning up my inbox. There's something oddly satisfying about erasing the ghost of a man who once thought he owned your sleep. When HR called me in to clarify some details, I stayed calm. They asked how long I'd known about the discrepancies. I told them the truth, enough to protect myself, not enough to feed their gossip. They thanked me for my professionalism. That's corporate, for we'll never mention your name again, but you saved our asses. I didn't go back the next week. I didn't quit right away either. I just didn't show up, and nobody called. That's how you know you were never indispensable, when the system keeps humming without your noise in it. I started sleeping through the night. No phone by the bed, no glow against the ceiling, just dark, steady quiet. Mara and I took a trip upstate. Small cabin. Trees that didn't care about metrics or revenue goals. We sat by a lake one morning, and she said, "You look lighter." "I am," I said. "Turns out peace doesn't text you at 2 a.m. She laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in months. A week later, I wrote my resignation letter. Short, dry, clean. Effective immediately, I'm stepping away. I've learned what I needed to learn. Boundaries aren't a luxury. They're a mirror. I sent it, powered off the laptop, and left it on the kitchen counter. I didn't tell anyone at the company goodbye. Didn't need to. Evan's name faded from the email threads, the project boards, the little plaques outside the offices. In another few weeks, no one would even remember the sound of his laugh echoing down the hallway at midnight. But I would. Not as a wound, as a measurement. The line you draw once and never cross again. Months later, I got a message from an old coworker. Rumor is, Evan's under review for fraud. Corporate audit found a paper trail. I typed back. Lost track of time, I guess. And I meant it. Now my mornings start the same way. Coffee. No alarms. A notebook instead of a screen. Sometimes, before sunrise, I sit on the balcony and just listen. There's no ping. No vibration. No ghost voice asking for favors wrapped in urgency. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I finally understand the simplest kind of revenge. Not watching someone fall, but standing exactly where they tried to bury you and breathing easy.